It's round two between the Oilers and the Panthers as the Stanley Cup Final is on the horizon. Hey everyone, welcome into Off the Post. Rob Wong joined alongside by Steve Simmons and Bruce Garrioch. And guys, it was a heck of a series last year with the Oilers rallying from an 0-3 deficit in the final, ultimately falling in 7 games to the Panthers. This year, both teams have looked pretty dominant at times as they are ready for a rematch, which gets going on Wednesday night in game number 1. Steve Florida, of course, made some big additions with Brad Marchand and Seth Jones, and they are as deep as anyone. But the Oilers right now without one of their top forwards in Zach Hyman, but their depth has done a good job stepping up as well. When you look at Edmonton's roster, how do you think they stack up against the Panthers in this year's Stanley Cup Final?
Well, when you start with Edmonton's roster, I start right at the top, and that's with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And when you have the two best players in the series, then I think that sort of tilts the roster in your favor somewhat slightly. And yes, they went 7 games last year and almost to overtime for 7 games. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they go 7 games and almost to overtime again in that 7th game. Just this time, I think Edmonton's going to win. And it's not that the roster is a whole lot better, although it is in places, especially on defense. It is better on defense. Part of it's better on defense because the defensemen are playing better, and partly because additions that didn't seem like very good additions have turned out to be better additions than we might have thought they would be. But every time I watch McDavid play, he looks possessed to me. He looks like I'm not going to get close again and let this get away. And there he's got Draisaitl right beside him. And you ask yourself, okay, who are the best forwards on the Florida Panthers? And you start with Sasha Barkov and probably Matthew Tkachuk. Well, I don't know what you've thought, Bruce, but Matthew Tkachuk to me has not looked like prime grade best version of Matthew Tkachuk in this playoff season, coming off whatever his injury was. He's not playing like he did in either of the past 2 playoff years where he was a dominant guy for the Panthers. So I worry that they may not have an answer in 3-2 hockey games for what McDavid and Draisaitl and anybody else kicks in for the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, and really, I mean, one of the things we haven't talked about is, and one there is no question in either of our minds, Steve, that the Edmonton Oilers have the two best players in this series in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And I think that the one wild card in all of this, and we all know what everything comes down to, is goaltending. And you've got Sergei Bobrovsky on the other side, and then you've got the Edmonton Oilers on the other, with Stuart Skinner on the other side, and Pickard ready to step in, I guess, if he's needed. I look at it like, okay, the Oilers have been here. They came charging back from a 3-0 deficit and forced a game 7 last year. The Florida Panthers are tough customers to deal with, but I think where people might not be giving the Oilers credit is they have physical people and they have the ability to play physically. And uh, can they match the Panthers physically? No, because they probably don't play as dirty. But I think you're right too. I think we're going to hear after the season that Matthew Tkachuk is probably having some surgery, right? Like because he doesn't appear to me to be fully recovered from whatever happened to him at the Four Nations.
I have a theory I use most years in picking who's going to win playoff series and who's going to win the Stanley Cup. The team with the best goaltender, the team with the best defense, and the team with the best coach are always how I sort of stack it up. So in the last round, Jake Ottinger was supposed to be the best goalie. Miro Heiskanen was supposed to be the best defenseman, and Pete DeBoer was supposed to be the best coach. And guess what? Edmonton spanked Dallas. So at this point, all bets are off with this Oilers team. Stuart Skinner, let's be honest, is not your prototypical Stanley Cup winning goalie. He's barely an NHL starter.
But and sorry to interject, Steve, but I was going to say, you've seen goaltenders like that before win Stanley Cups. The two that come to my mind are, and maybe I'm wrong, and you know better than me. I'm thinking Chris Osgood and the connection to Mike Vernon,
And
right?
see,
Like,
Mike Vernon, I'll separate because I think Mike Vernon was an awfully good goalie. But I'll take an Antti Niemi. I'll
yeah,
take
yeah,
two Corey Crawford Stanley Cups. I'll take an
yeah,
Aiden Hill Stanley Cup. Like
right,
those are
okay.
closer to who Stuart Skinner probably is, and yet he's been unbelievable when he's had to be. And so, nothing about the Oilers makes sense except like it's 3-2 in that game the other night, and it looks like Dallas is starting to take over the game coming back. And if I was DeBoer, I actually would have switched back to Ottinger at that point in time. And what happens? McDavid scores a goal for the ages. He scores one of these great. I mean, how many playoff goals have you seen better? I can think of. I can't even think of one. But how maybe Lemieux somewhere along the line did it. To Bork in that one playoff year. But how many goals has a guy just gunned it, beat a guy, had his hands move at full speed, make the move, score the goal? Like there was only one player in hockey who could score that goal, and he scored it. And that's what you have to look at with this matchup. Who does Florida have to sort of balance off a McDavid and a Draisaitl? And one thing to mention, Florida Panthers penalty kill, by the way, is outstanding. And the Oilers' power play is outstanding. And so you're going to see a great power play against a great penalty kill, which usually means the penalty kill wins. So you got to win this series at even strength. And I think the Oilers can win that at even strength.
Well, it's interesting at this point. The Oilers are favored, according to the sports books, heading into the Stanley Cup Final. And feels like all postseason long, Bruce, we've been hearing about Paul Maurice's brilliance on and off the ice, but not so much about Oilers head coach Kris Knobaluch. I don't know if this is the East Coast bias with three guys on the East Coast, but Knoblauch now into his second season, back for another Stanley Cup Final appearance. What can we really say about him at this point, and is he maybe not getting the recognition that he deserves?
Well, I don't think he has gotten the recognition he deserves, and I think sometimes, we get bamboozled by guys who treat the media well, like Paul Maurice and John Cooper, who are two of the best in our game to deal with. But I mean, I haven't dealt with Kris Knoblauch much, but when I watch his press conferences and the way he interacts, I think he's pretty forthcoming and he tells good stories. I think that you got to give the guy credit, right? Because he went into an absolutely awful situation last year, taking over from Jay Woodcroft, and the team looking like it's on the verge of just completely falling apart. And not only got them to the playoffs, got them to the Stanley Cup Final. And now he's at his second Stanley Cup Final, and I read that not many coaches have been able to coax that out of their team, Steve. And he's got the two best players in the world, but he knows how to use them and where to use them. And the challenge is going to be more difficult. We haven't talked about Zach Hyman. I mean, that's a difficult challenge for them without Hyman. He brings a lot, Steve. Um, but I look at it and I say this guy's just done a terrific job in 2 years.
You don't judge a coach by how funny he is at a press conference or how many interviews he gives to you and me, Bruce. This is what you judge a coach. The general manager gives him a lineup. Here's your roster. What do you do with it? Now, last year, there were some parts of that roster, frankly, that Kris Knoblauch did not like. And he lived with it because he had no choice. And some of those guys he did not like and wanted traded a year ago are on his roster now and playing awfully well. And so what he's done is he took a team that didn't have Elias Ekholm, or Matthias Ekholm, sorry, to start the playoffs, their best defenseman. Last year, Darnell Nurse was a disaster in the playoffs. Very, very sound playoffs this year around. He's got so much out of John Klingberg. When I saw John Klingberg in Toronto, he looked like a dead body. I mean, he just looked like he couldn't play at all. And he's got him and Wallman and whatever he's done and what he's done with Connor Brown. He's taken that roster and he's made it work. And he's especially made it work from the moment that they look dead, which is what happens a lot of times to Stanley Cup champions. They have that moment in the playoffs where they're about to be eliminated. And the
And that
moment
was them against LA, wasn't
Yep,
it?
they're down
Yeah.
2-0 and about to lose game 3 and really could have lost game 4 as well. So they're down either 3-0 or 3-1 and they're not. They win both of those games. And I think they're 12-2 since then. Like if you're not impressed with Kris
Kris
Knobaluch.
Knobaluch.
I want to call him Chuck all the time, believe me.
If you're not impressed with Chuck Knoblauch, watch him throwing from second to first. But if you
Yeah.
want to see a hockey coach, take a look at Kris Knoblauch. He's done a phenomenal job in a season and 3 quarters with the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, like I said, it's going to be a heck of a series, and it's either going to be a Canadian team and Connor McDavid hoisting the Stanley Cup for the first time in his career and for a Canadian team in a long time, or it's another Florida Sunshine State Stanley Cup with the Panthers. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Bruce Garrioch and Steve Simmons, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.